All right, good evening. Zach Howard here. It's June the 10th. Good evening, and we have a presentation tonight on leveraged Bitcoin equities, the investment opportunity that presents itself here as Bitcoin takes a run at new all-time highs in fiat money, $110,000, and approaching highs that we have not seen ever before. The opportunity for alpha in the space, capturing some of the names that no one's really paying attention to, only people that are deep in the weeds in these Bitcoin treasury plays. I've done some analysis here on the biggest ones in the sector: MicroStrategy, Metaplanet, the blockchain group out of Europe, Semler Scientific, and KULR Technologies. The criteria for the evaluation is we have a Bitcoin target price of 150,000 by 2026. That is a thesis in the next 6 months, with the backdrop of continued debasement of fiat currency and more institutional adoption and more treasury company adoptions to this strategy, this new asset class that is putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet using traditional fiat tools, whether that is convertible debt, common shares, preferred shares, warrants, at the money offerings, what have you. Let's get Bitcoin. Selling NANDs, T-set, and silverware, whatever we can. That's what we're looking at here. That is leverage Bitcoin exposure. So Bitcoin first companies, the companies that are thinking before operations, before what their balance sheet looks like from a traditional fiat debt to equity standpoint, what their earnings per share from a traditional fiat earnings multiple. That is not what we're after. That is not what we're trying to capture here. We're trying to capture companies that are accelerating this race long before the rest of Wall Street figures out what's happening. These guys, these 5 players, are ones I see as key leaders in the race, and they're out in front. We're going to look at days to cover, Bitcoin yields, the mNAV of these type of companies, and particularly how they stand out. These are new metrics, and they are a learning process as we go. Things are changing rapidly in the space and with these companies, so it's tough to keep up. So we're going to take a stab at it here tonight. The race is indeed on. So what are we looking at? MicroStrategy, Metaplanet, the blockchain group, Semler, and KULR. The current mNAV. So the mNAV, the multiple net asset value, the ratio of the market cap to its Bitcoin holdings value, or looked at otherwise, the enterprise value, which would also include its debt less its cash. Bitcoin yield, the rate at which companies are acquiring more Bitcoin, how quick they are enacting and actually executing on their strategy. And the days to cover, how long would it take a company at its current Bitcoin stacking rate to accumulate enough Bitcoin to justify its market cap? Smaller leveraged Bitcoin equities demonstrate significantly higher Bitcoin yields and shorter days to cover metrics, but it's not always just one metric or the other. There's a lot to look at when we're looking at these companies and how quick things are changing underneath the surface. So currently there, the blockchain group has arguably the richest valuation from that first metric in the field of the 5. However, just today, they announced a $10 billion treasury accumulation strategy of how they want to accumulate Bitcoin, and they are going to scale up faster than they've been scaling. They've already been doing it rapidly. They're at 1,471 Bitcoin now, and they are going to hit the gas and try to do a Metaplanet, which is really outrunning the field. Top 5, I think they're about to surpass in Bitcoin treasury holdings. Basically, Mara Holdings, Galaxy Digital, I think a couple others they're behind at this point, and the king, MicroStrategy, Mr. Michael Saylor, well out in front. Semler taking a pretty good run at it too. Then we look at traditional valuation of its market cap from a fiat dollar standpoint. Saylor way out in front. Metaplanet coming on strong, but new guy in town just 511 million. Semler and KULR arguably well under the radar because of their market caps currently from what most people are scanning in the market of their valuations. But we're not looking at fiat market cap. That is not what we're trying to look at. The most recent 100-day Bitcoin yield strategy is trailing Metaplanet and the blockchain group. Semler also trailing. Bitcoin yield, though, with strategy the highest next to blockchain group off the charts. What they've done in the last 60 days, not just the last 100 days, they've really put their foot on the gas, as I just mentioned. And then finally, days to cover. The days to cover how long it would justify to rationalize their market value to their stacking acceleration. Similar, pretty attractive here at these levels, along with Metaplanet. And one that no one has really had on the radar is this KULR. Just did a big raise, jumped up their Bitcoin holdings to 920 here in the last week alone. The strengths and challenges of each individual company. So Saylor has first mover advantage on the US and the biggest capital markets in the world. He keeps hitting the ask and the market hits the bid on soaking up whatever he has to offer, whether that's preferred shares, common shares, convertible debt, what have you. Metaplanet, first mover advantage in Asia and Japan, the most volatile and the most highly traded stock in 2025 in Japan markets. It's taking advantage of that. And then the blockchain group trying to do the same in Europe, being first mover advantage on the Europe markets, the only Bitcoin equity. Why that's important, there's tax favorable treatment for individuals in France who own equities. Also, Europeans have hard to access US ETF, Bitcoin ETFs, like North American participants. So if you're in Europe, particularly in France, you want exposure to Bitcoin, you're in a pension plan or something, you can't buy actual Bitcoin, this is your next best thing. Two latecomers to the game, KULR and Semler. But like I say, they're trying to hit the gas here now, and why no one is paying attention as well. So maybe some opportunity to stack into these smaller names before too many people notice. That's where the opportunity is finding investments and trades before the next big thing is out there and mainstream narratives. What would be an optimal capital allocation strategy? You had $100,000 and you had a 1 to 2 year horizon to deploying that. That wasn't inside a 60-40 target date fund. You didn't want to own any fixed income. You didn't want to own any safety trades like REITs or gold or anything that you just want to really capture the opportunity that this digital asset space presents here in 2025. Arguably, you could put 30% in Metaplanet, 20% in KULR, 10% in the blockchain groups, 30% in Semler, 10% in strategy. Multiple expansion opportunity, compounding effect, market leverage, all these things come into play. And then we had the diversification around the globe of all these 5 players. What are possible expected returns if we price out a Bitcoin price of 150,000, all else being equal, 6 to 7 months from now? 5 to 10x for Metaplanet, possibly. KULR, 8 to 15. The blockchain group arguably has the most upside based on how fast they're scaling their Bitcoin holdings and their strategy to really accelerate now with that $10 billion announcement today. While Semler and strategy are slower off the grind to execute theirs. Saylor has already grown his so fast, and he's already getting close to that 600,000 number. So the rate of change for strategy is arguably a lot less from here than those other big players. However, important to note, if Bitcoin hits 119,000, I think is the magic number for Q2 here at the end of June, strategy will have the largest gain on earnings based on its Bitcoin holdings of any company in history. Will be eligible for S&P inclusion in the following quarter. I did a video on that last week, and what that means then for more passive flows buying that MSTR strategy shares. Risk assessment on each company. Arguably, all these plays are high risk, especially compared to traditional Wall Street trades, fixed income treasuries, yada yada, all that old school stuff. But if Bitcoin is the new asset class and these are the first mover advantage, if you're subbing out your exposure to bonds, fixed income, and now you want to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet, arguably this is not a lot of risk. If that is where we're going with the puck, why not 100% in the highest performers? Well, there's execution risk here in these some smaller companies. They can't scale as quick as someone like Strategy has done with access to those capital markets in the USA. There's liquidity risk in some of these thinly traded names like Semler and KULR that are not in pension funds, that are not in 401ks as such as like a Sailor Strategy is going to be potentially here. Regulatory risk in some environments outside the US, we don't know. EU and Asia, what they present right now, they are fine with those companies, but who knows what lies ahead. Whereas the SEC in the USA seems to have a clear path forward for adopting and participating in the growth of the Bitcoin movement. Premium valuations, maybe, but like if we're looking through the lens of historical metrics, I don't know if you have any argument there when it comes to premium. Days to cover, we talked about Bitcoin yield declining, execution failures. Alternative approach, 40% in the higher risk Semler, 30% in Metaplanet, 10% in the less risky strategy, and 20% in the growth opportunity that KULR presents. How do we look if we have a super bull case of 200,000 Bitcoin in 2026? How do we look at the base case that we started off, a thesis of 150? Worst case scenario, we stick around here, this $100,000 level. Maybe the US government somehow figures out their fiscal shitstorm and gets their house in order, and people want to buy fiat, buy the dollar, thus buy treasuries again. Who knows? Anything is possible. You believe in Santa Claus? That's a possibility. We'll put it in there as a base case, or you just want to buy the S&P and keep riding the wave that is those Mag 7 stocks. That's also potential comparison. So we're looking at the key catalyst here. Bitcoin price appreciation moves all boats. As the price of Bitcoin rises, the ones that stack the quickest, stack the fastest is going to benefit them, and thus institutional adoption. The leading indicator, days to cover. Companies with shorter days to cover metrics demonstrated superior execution. Okay, they're really accelerating their strategy, which Metaplanet and the blockchain group are out in front. Semler also coming on strong. Bitcoin yield, Metaplanet also ranks high there, along with the blockchain group. Okay, risk diversification. We talked about that. So I kind of like that there's no one really looking at Japanese and Europe options for Bitcoin exposure right now, and there's a brand new market. It's like I said previous, you're heard about the gold rush in the Yukon through a telegram, a letter from your great uncle that was sent 2 months ago, and you're trying to get your way to the Yukon and buy a shovel and go looking for the gold. This is what's happened in some of these countries now before anyone even knows about it. The rush is just starting. So is it 12-month horizon? We're looking at 150,000 Bitcoin as our target price. We want to have a balanced approach through these 5 names. Keeping in mind, this is just strictly looking at Bitcoin equity exposure, particularly through the lens of these leveraged opportunities and what they could present. Strategy, like I say, has the convertible debt. It's at the money equity offerings, aggressive debt, and equity financings through Metaplanet as well. The blockchain group is taking a piece of what both those two companies have done and trying to execute a faster stream. It's a pretty ambitious goal to go from this current 500 million in market cap Europe to 10 billion, which announced today. But it's going to put people's radars on this blockchain group. It's up 3,800% in 2025, I think, is equities. Similar, balanced it, equity, core business. They have existing healthcare business to fall back on, but their strategy is definitely shifting to the Bitcoin treasury accumulation. And KULR just announced a 300 million at the money, so they are coming on too. They are getting into the game with the real players, but can they catch the ones that have been growing? That's what I got for you. Just something to put on your radar here. It is for research, educational, and entertainment purposes only, not investment advice. But I kind of like looking at these Bitcoin treasury plays, and these are the five that I have on my watch list as Bitcoin makes a new all time high here in the coming days. Have a great day.